I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for March the 11th, 2026. Today and tomorrow on our theology roundup, we will be discussing sorting through native, sojourner, and God's people today. Of course, we have recently just gone through a multi-part 3-week series on one law or one Torah theology, hopefully not only addressing the different passages which use one law or one statute properly, and why we have some disagreements as a ministry with one Torah theology. But we just completed after that a series addressing Micah 4, 1 through 3, and Isaiah 2, 2 through 4, the nations streaming to Zion in the end times to, of course, be taught from God's law and universal peace manifesting. So along with that, I think it is appropriate continuing today and tomorrow to discuss sorting through native, sojourner, and God's people today, because the simple yet complicated rule of biblical interpretation is to interpret a text for its original audience first and then derive principles for today. And so what do we do when we read the Torah or the Pentateuch and we see references to the native born of Israel, the sojourner in ancient Israel? What do we do about this? And how do we extrapolate the proper approach today? So we're going to talk about this both today as well as tomorrow. And this is something which I originally put together a few years ago for not only Outreach Israel News, our monthly newsletter, but then it was incorporated into the updated and expanded Messianic Torah Helper publication. All right, so let's get into this. If you will, please turn with me to the Messianic Apologetics website, messianicapologetics.net. Okay, here you see the articles tab. Click on OIM News. So if you want to know where the back issues of Outreach Israel News are on Messianic Apologetics, this is where you go. Go down to the year 2024. So see 2026, 2025, and then to the month of September. So click there, and of course, a back issue of this newsletter will appear in PDF form. All right, so here you have the issue sorting through native, sojourner, and God's people today, and this is what we're going to be reviewing. Part of it today and then part of it tomorrow. And of course, the important part is there are a lot of people who they read the Torah, and I mean this with all the love and respect in the world. They read the Torah like they do much of the Holy Scriptures, and they think it's being written directly to them living in the 21st century, when in fact, what we really need to do much better as Messianic people, what did the text mean, even the Torah mean for its original 13th or 15th century BCE, depending on how you date the Exodus, audience, ancient Israel, the community of ancient Israel in the ancient Near East. Okay. Committing oneself to having a Torah foundation in your theology is frequently not something which is easy. For while it is true that the Lord said, "For this commandment which I command you today is not too difficult for you, nor is it out of reach." Deuteronomy 30, verse 11, New American Standard. It is also true that proper biblical interpretation involves more than just reading the text in an English translation and somehow applying it or making it relevant. The Torah's instruction broadly composed direction issued to the ancient Israelites in the ancient Near East. These are the commandments which the Lord commanded Moses for the sons of Israel at Mount Sinai. Leviticus 27:34, New American Standard. There tends to be no disagreement across today's Messianic spectrum how all of God's people should be submitted to the moral and ethical principles of Moses' teaching. And with that, how its stories and accounts should help all to appreciate his ongoing plan of salvation history, culminating in the work of Yeshua the Messiah. There is disagreement when factors involving native born and sojourner in ancient Israel, issues such as what Jewish people are supposed to follow and what non-Jews or Gentiles are supposed to follow, and theological debates from one law, one Torah, to bilateral ecclesiology, to now distinction theology are all introduced into the mix. A huge part of the debate over the applicability of Torah commandments to the Jewish and non-Jewish people in today's Messianic movement just assumes that the Torah was written directly to us living in the 21st century. Indeed, how much of this debate just assumes everything has been written directly to us living in the 21st century and fails to take into consideration some of the ongoing factors in God's plan of salvation history. I mean, that is something which is absolutely imperative if we're going to properly interpret not just the Torah, Moses' teaching, but any part of Holy Scripture. That is why discussions and divisions often occur on the basis of Jews follow this and Gentiles can follow that. Very quickly, however, when study and examination of Torah instructions are conducted, that becomes an overly simplistic grid by which to view its code of conduct. Indeed, the more Torah and Tanakh study in which I have engaged and the experiences I have had within the Messianic community have led to a much different method of approach regarding applicability of commandments than is commonly seen. While I do believe in the post-resurrection era validity of the Torah for all of God's people, and that instructions such as the seventh-day Sabbath, Shabbat, or a kosher style of diet are important to consider, I nevertheless do not read the Torah as though it were written directly to me. I believe God's commandments are important, but many of today's Messianic people are in need of an adjustment in how to approach the Torah, and specifically matters of native born and sojourner in ancient Israel, and who we are today as God's people. Now, is this the approach you are likely to see at your Messianic Torah study? Probably not. Is it going to be the approach you see among a great number of one law or one Torah advocates? Probably not. It's probably not even going to be the approach you see among many in Messianic Judaism. But yet, having to read instruction from an original audience perspective, and yes, what this does mean is that you can't speak in broad strokes sometimes. You have to go into each individual piece of legislation. You've got to go into each individual piece of direction. And in some cases, as we're going to get into it later on, when you see terminology like B'nai Israel, for example, B'nai Israel, just in Judaism itself, there's a huge debate regarding whether it speaks of ethnic male Israelites or ethnic male and female Israelites. That's why in Bible translation, you see a variance. B'nai Israel rendered as sons of Israel. Likewise, you may see B'nai Israel rendered as children of Israel, or you just see it rendered as Israelites, right? Which is the best approach. Some versions have people of Israel, even though that would be Am Yisrael. that demonstrates that you have to go into certain pieces of legislation, certain pieces of instruction, and deduce whether, at the very least, you have only males or males and females being referenced. At the same time, there are places contextually where B'nai Israel, children of Israel, speaks of the broad community of Israel, not just male and female ethnic Israelites, but also different sojourners who had come into the community. And many people do not have the patience, they do not have the acumen, I'm sorry, to be able to just carefully go into certain passages and sort through what the details might be. And, the Messianic community right now is in a period where it is significantly struggling with not having worked on some of its hermeneutical or interpretational skills over the past decade or so. And right now, we're living in a time when things are getting increasingly more complicated in our world, increasingly more theologically complicated. I mean, just some of the things that are coming out about James Taliaferro here in the state of Texas, questions that he is raising as a progressive Christian, and we can't even sort through some of this. All right, let's continue. Is the Torah timeless? Have you ever asked yourself this question? One of the biggest challenges facing any reader of the Holy Scriptures is that simple yet complicated rule of biblical interpretation. Interpret a text from the perspective of its original audience first, and then deduce a modern application for the 21st century. In my experience as a Messianic teacher over many years, many within the Messianic sphere of influence have been starting to understand how necessary this is for reading and applying the apostolic scriptures, the New Testament. The letters of the Apostle Paul, for example, were clearly someone else's mail being directly composed for people living in the first century Mediterranean basin. Likewise, many of the difficult matters Yeshua spoke about in the Gospels can only be best understood through some grid of Second Temple Judaism. Because of our steadfast belief in Yeshua as the Messiah of Israel, most of us are involved in things messianic to in some way affirm his words of Luke 24:44. These are my words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all things which are written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. New American Standard. All of us believe that the Bible of Yeshua and his first disciples was the Tanakh, Old Testament. We all likewise believe that Yeshua's purpose with the Torah teaching, or Moses' teaching, was one of fulfillment, not abrogation. Matthew 5:17 through 19. In the Messiah's teachings, we find the definitive interpretation of Moses' teaching, and a number of the corrections witnessed in the Messiah's teachings often involved ancient misinterpretations and misapplications of what Moses intended. That would especially involve some of the "you have heard it said" statements and commentary in the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, now today's Messianic people, they tend to recognize that some kind of an original audience first approach is necessary for the epistles of Paul, where you very clearly have ancient audiences listed in the title. That's even true of the general circular known as Ephesians, which was written to those in Asia Minor, not necessarily Ephesus proper. The Gospels, some kind of Second Temple Jewish background in view, okay? But is that courtesy extended to the Tanakh itself and even the Torah? While it is to be highly appreciated how many Messianic people strive to understand the apostolic scriptures from the vantage point of some original first century CE audience first perspective, the same courtesy is not applied as frequently as it should be to the Tanakh or Old Testament. And this is even more true of the Torah or Pentateuch itself. Part of this may be due to the fact that, unlike classical civilizations such as Greece and Rome, intersecting with Second Temple Judaism, there is a much greater unfamiliarity with Sumer, Egypt, Canaan, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and others intersecting with the people of Israel throughout the many centuries of the Tanakh. While it is to be commended how today's Messianic movement widely and appropriately does consider the Torah to be the foundation of Holy Scripture, a reality too many have dismissed, it is entirely wrong to assume that the Torah is something which is somehow timeless. The Torah's code of instruction was originally given to the Israelites who were being prepared and readied by God to enter into their inheritance of the promised land. A responsible Bible reader has to read the Torah's accounts and directions in the context of ancient Israel in the 15th or 13th century BCE, depending on how one dates the Exodus. And so, yes, as much as I believe that the Torah, the Pentateuch, Moses' teaching, the law of Moses, is the foundation of the rest of Holy Scripture, the Torah is not timeless, okay? Its original audience was ancient Israel in the ancient Near East. And yes, I absolutely believe that Yeshua said he came to fulfill, not abolish, not abrogate, not do away with Moses' teaching. So it remains valid, it remains relevant, it remains important for us to study and to appreciate, to learn from. But in Yeshua's fulfillment, he does provide the definitive interpretation and application of Moses' teaching. And indeed, so much of the confusion many Bible readers have over the Torah does concern a failure to read it from some kind of an ancient Near Eastern audience perspective first. Ancient Israel getting prepared to enter into the promised land. How much of that is stressed at your Torah studies, Bible studies, your Messianic congregation? I don't know, but I have been in the Messianic community for 30 years now. In fact, Friday, we're probably going to discuss some of that. I haven't seen it emphasized that much. I only got this from getting some religious studies training and being forced into, ancient Israel was not isolated and alone. Just as we would try to understand Galatians from the perspective of the Galatians in Asia Minor in the 50s CE, there are things in the Torah which can only be best understood from the perspective of ancient Israel. Okay. Much of the conflict, which can be witnessed within the Messianic community regarding the applicability of commandments to Jewish or non-Jewish people, often comes because not enough people are reading Torah instructions with any kind of ancient vantage point in mind. None of us here today are the people who were directly given the Torah so that we might enter into the land of Canaan via the leadership of Moses' successor, Joshua. Okay, that's just a fact. For Jewish believers, the Torah for certain composes not only a major part of their spiritual heritage, but most especially their ethnic and cultural heritage. That is indisputable. For non-Jewish believers, the Torah composes their spiritual heritage. That is also indisputable. While it is inappropriate to view the Torah or Pentateuch as simply being dusty and old biblical history, today's Messianic people need to recapture some sort of original ancient Israelite audience first approach to reading and applying its instructions. If we are able to do this, it would be my hope that a number of present schisms can be mended. Okay. Now, here is something we need to really be probing as we review native sojourner, God's people today. Torah instructions are inclusive. Throughout much of today's Messianic movement, one will see the view expressed that non-Jewish believers are to be likened unto the sojourners or gerim who entered into the community of ancient Israel. It was not only descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob who were delivered by God out of Egypt, but also a mixed multitude of others who acknowledged him. Exodus 12:38. The admonition to the native born of Israel regarding the sojourner was fairly clear. You shall not oppress a stranger, since you yourselves know the feelings of a stranger, for you also were strangers in the land of Egypt. Exodus 23:9, New American Standard. It was specifically directed. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus 19:34, New American Standard. While it would be naive for any Bible reader to think that the sojourner who entered into the community of ancient Israel was exactly the same as the native born of Israel, a common error of one law theology, sojourners were to be welcomed in, especially as they acknowledged the one God of Israel. Okay? Gerim in the community of ancient Israel did not have any kind of rights of tribal inheritance. Gerim in the community of ancient Israel had to be circumcised to eat of the Passover sacrifice. Exodus 12:48. Gerim in the community of ancient Israel could be given an animal which died of natural causes. Deuteronomy 14:21, as a form of welfare, among others. Leviticus 19:10. It is plain from Deuteronomy 31:12, though, that both natives and gerim in the community of ancient Israel were to be educated in the principles of Moses' teaching and hardly discouraged from obedience. Assemble the people, the men and the women and children, and the alien who is in your town, so that they may hear and learn and fear the Lord your God, and be careful to observe all the words of this law. New American Standard. While circumcision on the 8th day would be an institution expected of the native born of Israel, Leviticus 12:1-3, with the question only asked of gerim in the community of ancient Israel in association with Passover, Torah instructions on the whole were inclusive of both native and sojourner. And indeed, one of the significant criticisms I know many of us have of critics of one law, one Torah theology, which, I've got critical remarks to make of it as well, is that they tend to overplay differences and distinctions between native and sojourner in ancient Israel, and they don't focus enough on the commonality. No, they're not exactly the same, but they got far more in common than not. And a lot of today's Messianic community does not do well with focusing on elements of commonality or common faith first. Okay. The fourth commandment explicitly directed, the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work. You or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. Exodus 20, verse 10, New American Standard. Not only were the families, servants, and animals within the community of ancient Israel to experience a Shabbat rest, but the gerim of ancient Israel were to experience a Shabbat rest as well. And presumably, everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. Exodus 31:14, New American Standard. Lechem, mecha lecha, mot yumat, could have indeed included both native and sojourner within ancient Israel. It has been recognized how the importance of the Sabbath to ancient Israel was rooted within God's intentions of cosmic history. You can look at Commentary on the Torah by Richard Elliott Friedman. If a non-Israelite sojourner entered into the community of ancient Israel, he or she was to be welcomed and loved by native-born Israelites and not actively turned away, especially as they acknowledged the one God of Israel. Instead, Gerim, or sojourners in the community of ancient Israel, were to learn Moses' teaching just as native-born Israelites were to learn Moses' teaching. And reading through the Torah, it is worthwhile to investigate to what degree, in various places, the wide company of ancient Israel, composed of both native-born and sojourner, was possibly addressed as Bnei Israel, as opposed to just male ethnic Israelites being addressed as Bnei Israel. Yet, in stark contrast to what has been commonly espoused by the one law, one Torah submovement, there were various differences between native-born Israelites and Gerim, or sojourners, within the community of ancient Israel. Some more targeted studies and reviews of Torah instructions, albeit uncomfortable for various sides, will be necessary in the future. And I would recommend you read the article by R.J.D. Nauth, Alien Foreign Resident in the Dictionary of the Old Testament Pentateuch. And actually, you might be able to see, actually, it would be right behind my head, but I have a copy of it. I'll just scoot over. I have a copy of it right behind me. Yes, I'm pointing to it right now. That should be it. I've had that since Old Testament introduction at Asbury Seminary. So that's just a good resource for many of you all to have anyway. All right. It can be fairly recognized that native and sojourner in ancient Israel had far more in common than not, and such commonality should control the reading of today's mature Messianic people. Still, one of the things which should never escape our notice, and this is something many of us really haven't processed yet as Messianic Bible readers and examiners, is how no 21st century Jewish or non-Jewish believer in Israel's Messiah is a native-born or sojourner living in the community of ancient Israel. Okay? None of us are the exact people to whom Moses' teaching was originally given. I don't care how you spin that. Okay? We live in the 21st century on the side of a lot of salvation history, and most especially on the other side of the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua. That is not to downplay Torah's instruction by any means, but it is to say we are not the original people to whom it was originally given. We're just not. You don't hear that in much of today's Messianic sphere of influence. You don't hear it from one law, one Torah people. You don't hear it from a lot of people in Messianic Judaism. But as Bible readers, examiners, and interpreters, that is something which we all have to reckon with. An institution like the seventh-day Sabbath, when properly followed, was inclusive in that both native-born and sojourner in ancient Israel would be receiving a Shabbat rest. Questions regarding the institution of the Sabbath in the post-resurrection era, among other Torah practices, are affected by further developments in salvation history. Okay, so for example, today, the seventh-day Sabbath, it would doubtlessly be expected of today's Messianic Jewish believers to keep Shabbat because, first of all, there's no indication in the apostolic writings post-Yeshua's resurrection that the Jewish believers stopped keeping Shabbat or the festivals or a kosher-style diet or circumcising their sons. As it concerns non-Jewish believers, the main focus of the words of the prophets, for example, taking shape, was they did not have to be ordered to keep the law of Moses. They did not have to be ordered to be circumcised as proselytes keep the law of Moses. Instead, the words of the prophets were in play. Acts 15, 16 through 18, they specifically James the Just specifically referred to the tabernacle of David being restored, Amos 9:11-12 Septuagint. But what words of the prophets did he have in mind specifically? Well, it has been acknowledged that Micah 4:1-3, Isaiah 2:2-4 could definitely have been in view for him. The nation streaming to Zion to be taught from Moses' teaching. Likewise, from Isaiah 66, guess what? All flesh in the Messianic age is going to be remembering the seventh day Sabbath. So these are prophecies we believe are taking place in a greater concentration today as we approach Yeshua's return, as we see the modern Messianic movement. It is appropriate to say that non-Jewish believers have to be specially called or summoned by the Lord into the Messianic movement as a proverbial Ruth. But a Torah institution like the Sabbath is inclusive. It's not exclusive. All right, so tomorrow we'll continue with part 2 of this. We'll talk about no longer sojourners and a number of other things as they concern this very important subject matter, as it involves how we interpret and how we apply Moses' teaching. All right, so with that said, let's now move over to our news roundup. We go through the news roundup after the theology roundup, of course, because the news is time sensitive. It changes from day to day. Also, along with that, right now, because of Operation Epic Fury or Roaring Lion, the news is changing from hour to hour. And it is very difficult, of course, to stay up to date with everything that is going on. But we can certainly have a small little snapshot. We can hit on some of the high points. The news stories I go through are things which I tend to encounter passively on social media. I don't go out and hunt for them, as it were. But right now, we know that you can just feel there's a lot of tension in the air. There are a lot of questions, not only as they involve the price at the pump, but the economy. I know a lot of people are very scared. A lot of people are very concerned. I do not know what your local Messianic congregation or synagogue does or does not do regarding current events. I would hope that there is some mention of 2 or 3 points every Shabbat by somebody in some kind of a prayer time. But indeed, as I am noticing, especially over the past year, and even going back to the past 5 to 6 years, ever since the pandemic, ever since the lockdowns, there are not enough people who are paying attention in the Messianic community as to when we are. And that is very disconcerting to me. And not only that, but how many people have a marrying and giving in marriage mindset. Life is just going to go on as normal. And no, none of us want to put our lives on hold because of the last days. But we also need to begin to think in a different way than we have thought before. And maybe this is just me. And, in the past 3 months, turning 45, being much older than my late father was. I mean, he died at 41 and a half. Being a single man, not having a wife or children. And, what am I here to do in the Messianic community? Am I here to do some of the work other people have said we don't want to do? And I'll have some more conversations about that throughout the year because of us as a family being in the Messianic community now for 30 years. That's huge. A lot of people like us in the first few months, in the first few, we've fallen on our face a few times. We've gotten a few bloody noses. We had a few scraped knees. We would have left. But we're still here and we're still declaring the Lord's message and we're still raising awareness of the important issues. Okay, so all the stories I'm about to go through, these will be available for you to look at later today when this episode is archived at messianicapologetics.net. So you can click on the links, read the articles in greater detail, watch the clips, whatever it is. We do our best. I do my best as a researcher, as an analyst, to provide you with documentation as to where I am getting everything, where I'm finding everything. And of course, we also want to give credit where credit is due. Okay, so our first story. Oh, before we get into this, number one, we need to be praying for peace. Israel, Gaza, the Middle East, Iran. Pray for all the believers. Pray for everyone for their safety. Pray for the safety of our servicemen and women, the IDF. Pray for everyone. Pray that this Operation Epic Fury, Roaring Lion, comes to a quick and decisive conclusion. That next month in April, we're talking about, hey, look at what's happening now in the Middle East. Number two, be praying for peace, Russia and Ukraine. And number three, be praying for reason and sanity to prevail here on the American home front. Whether that's the United States proper, the Western Hemisphere, Latin America, things which are coming out, social and religious changes we're seeing, etc. Okay, our first story, and this is from the Jerusalem Post. This is a useful article to read through. This is by Mike Evans. Some of you all know who Mike Evans is. Prominent evangelical to Tucker Carlson. Hitler would be proud of you. Opinion. Tucker Carlson's rhetoric echoes dangerous anti-Semitic myths, blurring the line between politics and hate. A deeper look at his harmful words. So this is a very useful article to read. Yes, it's Mike Evans. Whether you like him or not, it's not the point. But there are a lot of good things he summarizes here about Tucker Carlson pushing conspiracy narratives such as Jews controlling global media and finance or orchestrating regional conflicts are surging. And, there are a lot of people in today's Messianic community, and I mean this with all the love and respect in the world, and those of you all who are paying attention, you're keeping up to speed with all this kind of stuff. So you're going to go and you're going to look through an article like this. Should only take you a few minutes. I commend you. But there are other people who I don't know. I don't know why we're not having as many discussions as we should. We were having more discussions about this in the late 1990s than we are today. And is that because we have grown too callous to pay attention? Paying attention doesn't mean fear-mongering. It doesn't mean, for example, that next week the apocalypse is going to be upon us. Paying attention doesn't mean crying wolf. Paying attention does mean that we will not be caught unaware or off guard should certain things happen. I mean, for a lot of us in our lives, we monitor, for example, our vehicles, right? We make sure that not only do we have a full tank of gas, but we try to make sure what the air pressure is in the tires, try to check on the oil, we try to check on the different gauges so that not only is our car working properly, but that should it need to be repaired, should it need to have a tune-up, whatever it is, we do those things in advance rather than be caught unaware at the wrong time and have to spend thousands of dollars fixing it. This trying to pay attention to what's going on is no different than that. Okay. Our next story from Fox News, and there is a 31-second clip. This is from yesterday at 1:36 p.m., so it would have been while we were streaming yesterday. Carolyn Leavitt, she's the White House press secretary, says recent gas and oil price increases are only temporary and will drop rapidly once Operation Epic Fury's national security objectives are fully achieved. So I know that right now, many people and even our ministry, we've noticed a drop in sales, for example, huge drop in sales this month on books. It's because of this kind of stuff. People are worried about the economy. People are worried about spending money or not spending money. But is it only temporary? I certainly hope so. I'm certainly praying so, that once Epic Fury is over and the Strait of Hormuz can once again open up more normally, we see a drop in energy prices and a drop from energy prices from where they were before all of this started. Okay, from I-24 News, yesterday at 1:21 p.m., 37-second clip. They, meaning the Gulf states, are all thinking there may be sleeper cells all over the region, or if they get involved, the Houthis will be the next to attack more infrastructure. Okay, so the conflict Operation Epic Fury, it is designed to, more than anything else, cripple Iran's ability with their nuclear aspirations, ballistic missile aspirations, and using proxy terror networks in the Middle East, whether it's Hezbollah or in this case, the Houthis. We know that they're likely different dormant terror cells all over the Middle East, in fact, all over the world. And we've reported on that. You've doubtlessly seen some local warnings in your own communities to watch out for this, watch out for that, as certain things are taking place. We've even seen local warnings, I have at least, for the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. This is why, as believers, praying for peace and praying specifically peace in the Middle East, reason and sanity here at home, as believers, we're supposed to have wisdom, discernment to know where to go, where not to go, what to do, what not to do, looking out at our surroundings, and know that we live in a very tenuous time. Okay, here's an interesting article from My Charisma. I'll let you look at all of the specific conclusions or specific statements later on, but the headline is Erica Kirk's influence appears to be rising as new political roles begin to emerge, because she was just appointed to the board of visitors for the United States Air Force Academy. Apparently her late husband was intended to have that. We know right now that it has been about it's been 6 months since Charlie Kirk's assassination. And I know that immediately after that, my sister and I, Sister Jane and I, we did a Family Unfiltered episode where we talked about the legacy of Charlie Kirk. And many people, they were expecting what? They were expecting more people going back to church, more people reading their Bibles, some kind of a great revival. I've always been negatively disposed to the idea of a great revival. I do believe people will get serious about their faith, but massive revival, no. Scriptures talk about mass apostasy. And likewise, this book was released, Stop in the Name of God, and I pre-ordered it immediately. I did not receive it until, when was it? Mid-January, and by that time, the Charlie Kirk legacy had been smeared by all the different conspiracy theories, all the stuff that has come out from Candace Owens and various others. And the legacy of Charlie Kirk is now just all these conspiracy theories, and it's really quite sad to see that. So, of course, could things return to more of a tenor of get serious about God, get serious about your faith, read your Bible? They could, but I doubt it at this point. Okay, here's a good article or a good post from Newsmax on Instagram. Report: Ali Khamenei was opposed to son's succession. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who was recently killed in joint U.S.-Israeli airstrikes, was reportedly opposed to the idea of his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, succeeding him as Iran's supreme leader, according to a new report. Okay, and there are going to be a few other things we note about this. But Mojtaba Khamenei has been apparently elected now as the new Ayatollah. Nobody has seen him. No one really knows what his current disposition is. And his father didn't really support him as his successor. That begs more questions than answers them. All right, here's a good, I thought it was good anyway, in terms of me having a political science undergraduate degree. It's a post from Mark Levin yesterday on X, 6:07 p.m., where he raises a few important points. After we destroyed the Japanese regime in World War II, we wrote their constitution. In fact, as I learned it, it was called the MacArthur Constitution, and installed a government that would be aligned with us. We must give very focused thought to what comes after the Iranian regime's Navy, Air Force, missiles, and top leadership are destroyed. It still has a standing army, secret police, and an entire Islamist supporting infrastructure. There are many approaches to dealing with this sort of a democracy project or sending hundreds of thousands of dollars. But to be clear, if a void is created and left there, and we do not fill it, perhaps with our allies, or significantly influence how it is tilled, it most definitely will be filled by the forces in Iran that remain from the old regime. Okay, these are some very valid points. And looking at some of the comments about this, I mean, if you're going to see regime change in the Islamic Republic of Iran, see this theocratic fascist state removed, what are you going to replace it with? And so here, one of the useful observations from previous history is World War II, the government of Japan, the US played a direct role in writing its constitution. As I said, when I took Japanese politics at University of Oklahoma, we learned it as the MacArthur Constitution. It did, of course, keep the figure of the Japanese emperor intact, but it kind of established a constitutional monarchy. And the Japanese government has been a consistent ally of the United States ever since. And the good thing I would have to say about the rebuilding of Japan, as well as Germany, is the United States, in helping Japan rebuild, was not vindictive as other countries would have been. So in this regard, my observation would be the United States doesn't need to be vindictive in a possible rebuilding of Iran. But looking at some of the comments to Mark Levin's post, and some of them were from Iranian expatriates living in America, living abroad, there was a constitutional monarchy of sorts with the Shah, of course, who had to leave after the 1979 revolution. And there would be, of course, a template of returning back to what had been left behind in the revolution, what had been lost from the revolution, returning to that pre-revolution type of government and hopefully updating it for more of the 2020s going into the 2030s. That is what I would expect to see a lot of people rally around. So we'll see what, of course, happens. And there are going to be a lot of people who raise the question of what would or what could a new Iranian government actually look like. All right. From Inside Israel Intel, and there is a 25-second clip here. This is from 7:56 p.m. yesterday. U.S. Press Secretary Leavitt clarified that a complete surrender from Iran means the forfeiture of the weapons they use to back up their threats. When President Trump says that Iran is in a place of unconditional surrender, he's not claiming the Iranian regime is going to come out and say that themselves. What the president means is that Iran's threats will no longer be backed by a ballistic missile arsenal that protects them from building a nuclear bomb in their country. Okay, so the president wants unconditional surrender by Iran, wants them to lay down their nuclear aspirations, their ballistic missile aspirations. Those are the two main things that Operation Epic Fury is focused on. Okay, for yesterday at 7:20 p.m., 2-minute, 8-second clip. This is from Jesse Waters. Breaking: the Iran strategy is working and Tehran knows it. Iran tried a war of attrition, failed. Tried to split our Arab allies, failed. Tried to spike oil and shake the markets, failed. And then he goes on. Trump says they haven't seen anything yet. That's not escalation. That's leverage. Okay, so we know some of this is a little dated as of yesterday because of further reports, and we'll get into this in a moment, that the Iranians have begun to mine the Strait of Hormuz because he says oil is stable. The strait is open. How open? But this does reflect how the situation changes hour to hour. Okay. Next story from Newsmax. And this is a brief clip with Peter Navarro, Rob Schmidt's show. This from 7:27 p.m. And there's a 6-minute, 42-second clip. Peter Navarro, as usual, the boss is playing three-dimensional chess and understands that basically having a good global oil market that isn't subject to the Iran tariff premium is really the key to global prosperity. So here, the main statement of note is the boss is playing three-dimensional chess. Now, we are looking at this situation. Many of us, we're looking at it day to day. Some are looking at it hour to hour. We do not know how much planning, how much discussion has gone in to the Iranian situation. We can suspect, especially with consultations with the Israeli government and various allies and other partners, that a lot of these things, a lot of these potential scenarios have already been worked through, troubleshot. What do we do if Iran does this? What do we do if they do that? And that is what good military planners anticipate, right? What do we do if they launch all these drones, all these missiles at our allies and at our friends? What do we do if they mine the Strait of Hormuz? What do we do with this? What do we do? I have to believe that this has already been taken into account. And so whether you want to say the president is playing three-dimensional chess and he's thinking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead, he and his team, that's a useful description. But we know that there are a lot of things which still have yet to manifest. We have to be patient and we have to let them play out in normal time. And as believers, our responsibility is, of course, to pray for peace and to a decisive resolution to all of this. This happens very quickly because a lot of people are impatient because we go day to day with this news cycle, with this information age. Okay, from the California Post. Do not be confused. It's from the same publishers as the New York Post. The headline: Why even Ayatollah Khamenei opposed his impotent Nepo baby son Mojtaba from becoming Iran's next supreme leader. Nobody wanted impotent Nepo baby Mojtaba Khamenei to be Iran's next supreme leader. Not President Trump and not even Khamenei's own father, who held the job until he was blown up in the airstrikes earlier this month. So yeah, there is some definite nepotism as it involves Khamenei's son being elected the next Ayatollah. This statement about his physical abilities, I'm not going to comment on that, but there have been some reports about that. All right, from Fox News. And this is, of course, dated to yesterday, but lasting legacy marking 6 months since Charlie Kirk's assassination. And I already talked a little bit about this previously with the Erica Kirk headline. We were hoping and praying that as a result of somebody, whether you agreed with everything he said or asked about is not the point. But we were hoping that from Charlie Kirk's tragic assassination, that we would have seen more people going to church, more of a focus on their Bible, and many were hoping for a revival of sorts. That's not what we got. Very quickly, in the vacuum of Charlie Kirk's absence, guess what? You had people trying to fill it. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, and various others. And along with that, we're seeing more conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk than we are some of his spiritual influence. And that's really quite sad, and it's really quite concerning. All right, so our next story, and this is from Jesse Waters last night at 7:28 p.m., 8-minute, 41-second clip. Breaking: the most intense day of strikes is coming to Iran. And here he references B-52 doomsday bombers are on the way, capable of carrying 70,000 pounds of ordnance and nuclear bombs. And of course, the B-52 has been flown since the Eisenhower administration. But this is a really good thing for you to look through, just as it regards the intense buildup of Operation Epic Fury. Now, we're probably not going to know what the intense day is or what the most effective day of bombing or going after the Islamic Republic is until it's all over. And that's okay, because as God's people, our responsibility, pray for peace, pray for the safety of our, in this case, our airmen. We pray for the safety of our personnel, men and women in uniform, for the IDF, for our allies, all the civilians. We pray for that. We are not going to know everything regarding Operation Epic Fury, Operation Roaring Lion, but we're going to know enough to be aware of how it's progressing and how things are hopefully going to be wrapping up in the not too distant future. All right, here is a very concerning post I saw come across my feed on X, because one of the things we're here to do with Messianic Insider, we are not here to just look at, news events proper. We're also here to monitor different religious and social changes taking place. And I know that in our Messianic congregations and synagogues, you've doubtlessly had people talk about, there's rising anti-Semitism, rising anti-Zionism, rising anti-Judaism, all these things, and we've got to oppose it. But what are some of the things which are being said? So here is something which came across my feed, so I'm reporting on it. And along with that, I'm letting you know what people are saying, because maybe your congregational rabbi or leader doesn't follow social media, but there are young people who, if they get bored during the Shabbat service, what are they going to do? They're going to turn this thing on. They're going to turn their smartphones on. They're going to go to a place like X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and they're going to see a post like this. And this is from Shane Schatzel, I hope that I pronounced it properly, who identifies as a Roman Catholic. This is what he had to say in reposting a clip from John McKee. The world needs to understand that Jewish Zionism, as manifested in the Likud party coalition in the Israeli Knesset, is 100% dependent on Christian Zionism, primarily centered in the United States. The majority of Zionists are evangelical Christians, not Jews. And he comes to the conclusion that Christian Zionism is actually older than Jewish Zionism. And Christian Zionists outnumber Jewish Zionists by a minimum of 10-1. And his conclusion, there will never be peace in the Holy Land until Christian Zionism is rejected as heresy, not only by evangelical Protestants, but by all Christians entirely. Okay. And of course, he would definitely come from the position that the church is the new Israel. I mean, if you're Roman Catholic, you're likely to be one who is very favorable to supersessionism or replacement theology, although we can't say universally that all Catholics oppose Zionism. But he points out that 10-1 Zionists tend to be Christian, not Jewish. His conclusion that Christian Zionism predated Jewish Zionism. Well, that would be the case if somebody was reading their Bible and believed that God was going to regather the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob back to the Holy Land prior to the Messiah's return. But these are the kinds of things we're going to have to start reckoning with in greater numbers. I mean, look at some of the rhetoric that has come out of Carrie Prejean Baller. We don't have anything from her today. But Christian Zionism is a heresy, and they tie it to dispensationalism, which is way too simple, and Christians need to reject it. That is what is on the rise right now, not Christians need to stand with Israel and stand against anti-Semitism and with their Jewish neighbors. Okay, our next story. This is from the Epoch Times. Yesterday, the 10th of March, the headline, Iran launches new wave of missiles, drones across Middle East. Air defense systems were activated across the Gulf as authorities in the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait reported intercepting incoming threats from Iran. And indeed, that's the kind of activity that's only going to turn the Gulf states against Iran, because they're only going to absorb so much of that from another, fellow Muslim country before, we can't get our oil to market. Our economy is not doing well thanks to this conflict. It needs to conclude. Okay, here is a post from Visegrad 24 resending something from the exiled Crown Prince. This is from 3:12 a.m. today, March the 11th. Crown Prince Pahlavi Reza sends a new message to the Iranian nation. We're now at the decisive stage of our final struggle. I urge you to secure your essential provisions as soon as possible, and for your own safety, withdraw from the streets and remain in your homes. Continue to strike and do not show up for work. Continue your nightly chance to show your unity to the military and law enforcement forces. This is your last chance to break from the oppressive forces and join your people. And it concludes with, await my final call. Okay, so we don't want to be presumptuous. We don't know when that final call is, but what does this kind of a message by the exiled crown prince to his people indicate? What is going to be coming up as it involves Operation Epic Fury, Operation Roaring Lion? So we do pray for a quick, decisive end to this. We also pray for the people who want to see the Islamic Republic overthrown. And we most especially pray for all of the believers in Iran. Okay. Also from Visegrad 24. This is from 3:51 a.m. this morning. Breaking, 3 cargo vessels have been attacked by Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. 2 of them were damaged, while a fire broke out on the third one, forcing the crew to abandon ship. I can tell you right now, that is the kind of activity which is not going to be tolerated indefinitely by whether they're the different Gulf states there trying to get their oil to market, whether it is other countries whose ships, their commercial vessels, they're not able to transverse the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, we got that massive U.S. naval presence there. So a lot of questions are going to start being raised above. And this is what I have reported today. I'm sure there are other things which are going on because the situation changes from hour to hour. Okay, now here is a story which should really, really infuriate you. And it's something which not only you need to be aware of, but this is the kind of, excuse me, this is the kind of thing which has filled some of the vacuum left by Charlie Kirk. And it's a post from the channel on X, Fuentes Update. So this is from Nick. This is not from Nick Fuentes. It's an official fan account for Nick Fuentes. And there's a 1-minute, 47-second clip. And many of you all know that Nick Fuentes, if you've watched him at all, he just wants attention. So he will do anything to get attention. He will make outlandish remarks, make outlandish statements, use a lot of profanity, and he'll make things. Anyway, this post is about Iran is fighting for all of the Goyim. So what does Nick Fuentes say about this? Nick Fuentes is rooting for Trump to take a defeat on this war and walk away. If Iran falls, it proves Israel controls the entire world. So Nick Fuentes, no fan of Israel, no fan of Judaism, no fan of the Jewish people, definitely supersessionist. And he believes that he's fallen prey for a lot of anti-Semitic stereotypes and conspiracy theories. He wants the United States to lose this conflict because then, in his mind, in his twisted logic, he will be vindicated as, well, Israel's the one which has forced the U.S. to do this, and Israel's the one which really controls the world behind the scenes. So you all need to be aware of this as, Messianic people, and especially rabbis, congregational leaders. This is no longer we're no longer living in when? The 1930s. This is the 2020s. And this is, of course, something very, very concerning, and it's upsetting, and it affects all of us as a faith community in some way. Okay, our next story, we only have three more, so I'll try to make it quick now. From the New York Post, this is from today, Iran's impotent new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, is a no-show at his own succession rally. The charisma of a boiled potato. So the conclusion, Iran's newly appointed supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, was a no-show at his own succession rally in Tehran, and observers speculate that he's either wounded or hiding out in fear. Yes. So there are a lot of questions, a lot of speculation. We got a new Ayatollah, but where the hell is he? Right? Um, Even to the point where some people have thought that he's in ICU right now and going in and out of consciousness, not dead. I mean, we don't know, but these kinds of headlines doesn't even show up after he's been elected. These are the telltale signs of a regime which is falling. Okay, next story. Sent on by Eric Dougherty. There's a 2-minute, 24-second clip. This is from 7:55 a.m. today. Breaking. After President Trump got involved, 6 Iranian women's soccer players have been granted safe haven in Australia. But in a disgusting move, other Iranian players were intimidated by the IRGC if they chose to take asylum. Their families were threatened by the regime, and most or all of the players actually wanted asylum. So we do know that members of the women's football, that's the soccer team, were granted asylum, but some of them pressured. We're going to retaliate against your families if you don't come back home. This is very serious. And of course, these are the kinds of reasons why we've got Operation Epic Fury, this kind of oppression, this kind of persecution. But it's also a telltale sign of how many people, how many Iranians want the current government gone. And our final story, and of course, this is something which continues to change hour by hour, day by day. From Visegrad 24 today, Iran is planting mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is planting mines in the Strait of Hormuz, turning the vital waterway into a battlefield with daily clashes. And this is, of course, something we just are going to have to wait and see how it plays out, because that is something which will affect the world economy. So as we close up, number one, pray for peace. Israel, Gaza, the Middle East, Iran, pray for all the believers, pray for everyone. Servicemen and women, all of those who are involved in this Operation Epic Fury, Roaring Lion. Number two, pray for peace, Russia, Ukraine. We didn't have anything on that today. And number three, reason and sanity to prevail here on the American home front as we, sort through a lot of the changing social and religious dynamics. The Lord is in control. He is on his throne. We as believers have access to the infinite power of heaven. When I wake up in the morning, after I thank God for a day of new life, I pray for protection from threats known and unknown, because I know he does respond to that prayer. I've seen him respond to that prayer for many, many years. I pray, Lord, I am not invincible. I am not invulnerable. Be with me and let me know the work that you would have me to accomplish this day. So we'll see, of course, what happens by tomorrow. Tomorrow on our theology roundup, we will conclude with sorting through native, sojourner, and God's people today. We'll have part 2 of that. As always, on behalf of Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and support for all of our ministry efforts. Please do consider signing up for a $25 or $50 monthly donation. If you have not already, please do visit my website, messianicapologetics.net, where you can access a wide array of articles, frequently asked questions entries. You can access back issues of Outreach Israel News, back episodes of Messianic Insider, different McKee Moment shorts, and generally take a look at our ministry activities, adventures over the years. Please be sure to give this episode a thumbs up or a heart, as it will help our exposure on social media, and repost it to your own social media feeds. Facebook, X, Instagram. Email it to a friend. We will see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.